Move to the back of the line. This section isn't for people like you.
The words cut through the busy terminal like a knife. Miguel Santos didn't even look up from his computer screen when he said it. His voice carried that particular brand of authority that comes from years of deciding who belongs and who doesn't. In exactly 12 minutes, Miguel Santos would be fired. He just didn't know it yet. The woman standing in front of him didn't move. She wore a charcoal gray hoodie, premium jeans, and pristine white sneakers that cost more than Miguel's monthly salary. But he didn't notice the details. He only saw what he wanted to see. It was 2:30 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday at JFK Airport Terminal 5. The first-class priority lane stretched empty and inviting, marked by velvet ropes and polished brass posts. To the left, the economy check-in line snaked back toward the entrance like a river of frustrated travelers. Families juggled luggage and crying babies. Business travelers tapped impatiently on their phones. But the woman in the hoodie stood perfectly still in the priority lane, waiting. Miguel finally looked up. His name tag read, Miguel Santos, Customer Service Supervisor. He had been working at Skywing Airlines for 8 years. In his mind, he had earned the right to make snap judgments about who belonged where. "Ma'am, did you hear me? The economy check-in is over there." He pointed toward the crowded line with his pen, not bothering to hide his irritation. The woman's name was Simone Davis. She was 42 years old, African-American, and worth approximately $4.8 billion. 3 days ago, she had finalized the acquisition of Skywing Airlines. She now owned 87% of the company, including the terminal space, the computers, and the paycheck that Miguel would stop receiving in about 11 minutes. But Miguel didn't know any of that. All he saw was a black woman in casual clothes, standing where he believed she didn't belong. Simone adjusted the strap of her bag and said nothing. The bag was a Hermes Birkin, handcrafted in France, worth $150,000. It looked like any other leather handbag unless you knew what to look for. She had dressed carefully that morning. The hoodie was cashmere woven by a small Italian designer who didn't advertise. The jeans were custom-tailored in London. The sneakers were limited edition, released in batches of 50 pairs worldwide. Every piece of her outfit whispered wealth to those who understood the language. But that wasn't the point. The point was to blend in, to see how her airline treated customers who didn't look like they belonged in first class. Simone had been receiving complaints for months. Anonymous reports on social media, Reddit posts detailing discrimination, stories of black passengers being questioned, harassed, and humiliated on Skywing flights. Her board of directors had recommended hiring a consulting firm to investigate. Simone believed in seeing the truth with her own eyes. She had grown up in Detroit, raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident. Her grandmother, Rosa Davis, had saved for months to buy them both tickets to visit family in Atlanta. Simone was 8 years old, clutching her grandmother's hand as they boarded the plane. The flight attendant had stopped them at the entrance to first class. "Excuse me, you'll need to show me your tickets again." Rosa had shown their boarding passes. The woman examined them like they were counterfeit bills. "These seats are in coach. Down the aisle, please." But the tickets clearly read 3A and 3B. First class. Rosa's voice had shaken as she pointed to the seat numbers. "There must be some mistake," the attendant said. "These seats are reserved for our premium passengers." 8-year-old Simone watched her grandmother's shoulders slump, watched her swallow her pride and walk toward the back of the plane even though their tickets were valid, even though they had paid for those seats. That day, sitting in the cramped middle seats of Coach Simone, had made herself a promise. Someday she would make sure this never happened to anyone else. 34 years later, she stood in Miguel's line testing whether her company lived up to that promise. It didn't. "I have a first-class ticket," Simone said quietly, pulling out her phone. The boarding pass glowed on the screen. "Flight 447 to London. Seat 1A. Miguel glanced at the phone, then back at her face. He let out a short laugh. Look, I'm trying to help you here. That's obviously a mistake. First-class passengers don't dress like... He gestured vaguely at her outfit. Like that. A man behind Simone cleared his throat loudly. Jonathan Blake was 55 years old, wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than most people's cars. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His shoes were hand-polished Italian leather. He looked exactly like what Miguel thought a first-class passenger should look like. Is there a problem here? Jonathan asked, his voice carrying the weight of assumed authority. Some of us have connecting flights to catch. Miguel's demeanor changed instantly. His spine straightened. His voice became respectful. So sorry, Mr. Blake. Just dealing with a confused passenger. Please come right through. He gestured for Jonathan to step around Simone, essentially pushing her aside. Jonathan looked down at Simone with barely concealed disgust. These people always try to game the system. They see an empty line and think they can just walk up here. Simone felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, the same feeling she'd had watching her grandmother being humiliated. But she stayed calm. She pulled out her phone again. Scan it, she said simply. Miguel sighed dramatically. He grabbed the scanner from his belt and aimed it at her phone screen like he was holding a weapon. When this beeps, Red Security is escorting you out of my airport. Beep. The light flashed green. Miguel stared at the screen. His face went pale. Passenger Davis S. Seat 1A. Status 5. IP. Class invitation only. He blinked twice. Read it again. System must be glitching, he muttered. Or someone hacked your phone. This happens more than you think. But his voice had lost its confidence. Simone didn't respond. She simply stood there waiting. Jonathan leaned over Miguel's shoulder to look at the screen. That can't be right. Look at her. Miguel's radio crackled. A voice came through. All stations. We're showing a VIP passenger checking in at Counter 7. Status shows owner-level access. Please confirm. The blood drained from Miguel's face. He looked at Simone, then at his screen, then back at Simone. There's been some kind of mistake, he said weakly. Yes, Simone replied. There has been. Behind them, a teenage girl with her phone out had been recording the entire exchange. She whispered to her friend, Are you seeing this? This is crazy. She had already posted the video to TikTok with the caption, Skywing employee refuses to believe black woman has first-class ticket even after scanning it. In 30 seconds, the video had 500 views. In 2 minutes, it had 5,000. Miguel's supervisor was walking toward them, drawn by the commotion. 20 minutes later, Simone stood in the TSA pre-check line. Her phone buzzed with notifications. The video from the check-in counter was spreading faster than she had expected. The security officer examining her ID took longer than usual. He held her license up to the light, compared her face to the photo multiple times. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step to the side for additional screening. Simone looked around. The white businessman in front of her had walked through without question. The elderly white woman behind her was being waved forward. Is there a problem with my identification? Just routine, ma'am. Please step over here. David Kim, the airport security supervisor, noticed the commotion from across the checkpoint. He was a 20-year veteran who had seen every kind of discrimination play out in his workplace. He walked over. What's the situation, Officer Rodriguez? Just doing a routine check, sir. David looked at Simone's boarding pass, then at her ID, then at the officer. Ma'am, I apologize for the delay. Officer Rodriguez, please process the passenger normally. But sir, I was just following standard procedure for a TSA pre-check passenger with valid documentation, which means letting her through. Now. David turned to Simone and spoke quietly. I'm sorry about that, ma'am. Your incident number is TSA 472 Delta if you need to file a complaint. Simone nodded. Thank you. As she collected her belongings, David handed her his business card. If you experience any other issues today, please let me know. On the other side of security, Simone checked her phone. The TikTok video from check-in now had 47,000 views. The comments were lighting up. This is disgusting, sue them, I'm never flying Skywing again. That man should be fired. She opened her text messages and sent a single text to her assistant. Begin Phase 2. The response came immediately. All executives are standing by. Legal team activated. Media contacts ready. Simone put her phone away and headed toward the first-class lounge. The Skywing first-class lounge was an oasis of marble floors and leather chairs. Soft jazz played overhead. The lighting was warm and flattering. For a moment, Simone felt the tension leave her shoulders. The young woman at the reception desk smiled genuinely when she saw Simone's boarding pass. Welcome, Ms. Davis. We have a private suite available if you'd like, or the main dining area is serving our seasonal menu today. Finally, someone doing their job correctly. Just a quiet corner, please. And sparkling water. Of course, right this way. Right. Simone settled into a leather chair near the window and opened her laptop. It wasn't a standard MacBook. It was a custom-built machine with military-grade encryption designed for executives who handled sensitive information. She pulled up the employee files for Skywing's Flight 447 crew. Rebecca Walsh, lead flight attendant. 38 years old, 8 years with the company. Customer complaints, 47, all involving difficult passengers. All complaints involving passengers of color. Ashley Cooper Jr., flight attendant. 26 years old, 2 years with the company. Customer complaints 0. Commendations 12. Miguel Santos, ground services. 29 years old, 8 years with the company. Customer complaints 23. Pattern of discrimination evident. Simone's jaw tightened as she read through the complaints. Story after story of passengers being questioned, moved, or denied service. All filed away, all ignored. She thought about her grandmother again. Rosa had never complained about that flight to Atlanta. She had told Simone to forget about it, to not let anger poison her heart. But some things shouldn't be forgotten. Some things needed to be fixed. Her phone buzzed. A text from her chief legal counsel, TikTok video at 200,000 views. 3 news stations have picked up the story. Board meeting moved to emergency status. Another text from her head of security, background checks completed on all crew members for Flight 447. Files sent to your secure folder. Simone closed her laptop and looked out the window at the planes taxiing on the runway. In 30 minutes, she would board Flight 447. She would take her seat in 1A, and she would see exactly how deep the problem ran. The intercom crackled overhead. Skywing Flight 447 to London Heathrow is now boarding all passengers. First class and priority members may board at Gate B12. Simone finished her water, gathered her belongings, and headed for the gate. She had no idea that Rebecca Walsh was waiting for her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The jet bridge connecting the terminal to the aircraft stretched ahead like a narrow tunnel. The walls hummed with the sound of engines warming up outside. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on the metal flooring. Simone walked down the incline, her footsteps echoing softly. Ahead of her, Jonathan Blake was talking loudly on his phone about quarterly projections and hostile takeovers. Behind her, she could hear the rolling wheels of other passengers' luggage. At the entrance to the aircraft, 2 flight attendants stood like guards at a checkpoint. The first was young, blonde, and nervous-looking. Her name tag read Ashley Cooper. She was straightening and re-straightening the welcome information cards, clearly anxious about something. The second was the person Simone had been reading about in the employee files. Rebecca Walsh stood with military precision. Her uniform was immaculate, pressed to perfection. Her hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it looked painful. Her makeup was flawless, but her smile was cold. Rebecca had been with Skywing for 8 years. She had worked her way up from economy service to first-class purser through a combination of seniority and what management called maintaining standards. She took pride in creating the exclusive experience that first-class passengers expected. In Rebecca's mind, exclusivity meant keeping certain people out. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Blake." Rebecca purred as Jonathan approached. She practically curtsied. "So wonderful to see you again. Your usual seat. 2A is ready, and I've already chilled your preferred champagne. Good to see you, Rebecca. It's been a brutal week. I'm counting on you to make this flight civilized." Jonathan stepped onto the aircraft without showing his boarding pass. Rebecca already knew he belonged there. Simone stepped forward next. Rebecca's smile vanished instantly. Not gradually. It simply disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. She looked at Simone, then looked past her to see if any other passengers were coming. When she realized Simone was next in line, she looked annoyed. "Boarding pass?" Rebecca demanded, holding out her hand. No welcome, no greeting, just an outstretched palm. Ashley Cooper glanced between them nervously. Even she could sense the tension. Simone held up her phone showing the digital boarding pass. Rebecca didn't scan it immediately. Instead, she studied the screen, then looked at Simone again. "This is first class," Rebecca said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Yes, it is. This section requires dress code compliance." Simone looked down at her outfit, then back at Rebecca. "I wasn't aware Skywing had a dress code for passengers." "We maintain certain standards," Rebecca replied icily. "Our first-class cabin serves a very particular clientele." Behind Simone, other passengers were beginning to form a line. She could hear murmurs of confusion about the delay. Ashley Cooper finally spoke up. "Rebecca, maybe I should just scan her pass and I'll handle this, Ashley." Rebecca's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She finally took Simone's phone and scanned the boarding pass. The device beeped green and displayed Davis Simone. "Seat 1A. Status 5IP priority." Rebecca stared at the screen. Her face tightened. "There seems to be an error with our system." "What kind of error?" Simone asked calmly. "This seat assignment. It's unusual." Jonathan Blake had stopped a few feet inside the aircraft and turned back to watch the confrontation. His voice carried clearly. "Is there a problem here, Rebecca? Some of us have schedules to keep, just verifying passenger credentials. Mr. Blake, we'll have this sorted momentarily." Rebecca handed the phone back to Simone but didn't step aside to let her board. "I'm going to need to confirm this with my supervisor. Your supervisor." "Yes, this type of discrepancy requires management approval." Ashley Cooper looked mortified. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," to Simone when Rebecca wasn't looking. Simone remained perfectly calm. "How long will this take?" "As long as necessary to ensure proper passengers are in appropriate seats." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Behind Simone, passengers were getting restless. Someone called out, "What's the holdup?" Simone pulled out her phone again, but this time she didn't show her boarding pass. She opened her camera app and began recording. "Could you repeat what you just said about proper passengers?" Rebecca's eyes widened. "You can't record on airline property without consent." "Actually," Simone said quietly, "I can." 10 minutes later, Simone stood beside seat 1. A while Rebecca consulted her tablet for the third time. Other first-class passengers had boarded and were watching the drama unfold. "Ma'am, I've reviewed our passenger manifest and this seat appears to be unavailable." "Unavailable how?" "It's reserved." "For who?" Rebecca hesitated. "For passengers who meet our first-class criteria." Ashley Cooper was hovering nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. She whispered to Rebecca, "The system shows it's assigned to her. Maybe we should just—" "Ashley," Please prepare the galley for departure. I'll handle passenger seating. Jonathan Blake was now settled in his seat with a glass of champagne, enjoying the show. He called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. I've been flying this route monthly for 5 years. Never seen anything like this before. A woman in seat 3B, Jennifer Martinez, was discreetly filming the interaction on her phone. She was a documentary filmmaker traveling to London for a film festival. She recognized injustice when she saw it. This is insane, Jennifer muttered, posting the video live to her Instagram account. Flight attendant refusing to let black woman sit in seat she paid for. Rebecca noticed the phones pointing in her direction and raised her voice. For everyone's safety and comfort, I need to resolve this seating issue before we can depart. What seating issue? Simone asked. I have a valid ticket for this seat. Our company policy requires verification of passenger eligibility for premium cabin service. And how is eligibility determined? Rebecca paused. She knew she was being recorded. She knew she needed to be careful with her words. But 8 years of getting away with this behavior had made her bold. First-class passengers typically meet certain expectations regarding presentation and background verification. The cabin fell completely silent. Even Jonathan Blake stopped drinking his champagne. Jennifer Martinez stopped recording and spoke directly to Rebecca. Did you just say what I think you said, ma'am? Please stay out of this matter. I'm staying out of nothing. You're discriminating against this woman because of her race. I'm following company protocol. Bull said a man in seat 4A, a tech executive from Silicon Valley. I've flown every major airline. There's no background verification for passengers. Rebecca's face was flushed now. She was losing control of the situation, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. I have the authority to determine appropriate passenger placement to maintain cabin standards. Simone remained standing beside her seat, calm as still water. Are you refusing to allow me to sit in the seat I purchased? I'm ensuring all passengers have the appropriate experience they expect in first class. Based on what criteria? Rebecca looked around the cabin. Every passenger was staring at her. Some were openly recording. She was trapped by her own prejudice, but she couldn't admit defeat. Based on my professional judgment about passenger suitability. That was when Ashley Cooper finally found her voice. Rebecca. This is wrong. Her voice was quiet but clear. She has a valid ticket. The system confirmed it. We need to let her sit down. Rebecca whirled around. Ashley, you are out of line. No, Ashley said, her voice getting stronger. You're out of line. I've watched you do this before and I should have spoken up then. I'm speaking up now. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut. Passengers were shifting in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Jennifer Martinez made the decision for everyone. She stood up. Ma'am, she said to Simone, would you like to use my phone to call corporate? Because this is definitely going to be a problem for them. Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger. Ma'am, return to your seat immediately or you'll be removed from the aircraft. For what? Offering to help a passenger being discriminated against for interfering with crew operations. Jonathan Blake finally set down his champagne glass. You know what I think I need to call my lawyer? I have a feeling I'm about to witness something very expensive for this airline. That was when Simone made her decision. She had seen enough. Fine, Simone said quietly. I'll sit down. She moved toward seat 1A. Rebecca stepped directly into her path. Ma'am, I told you this seat isn't available, and I told you I have a valid ticket. The ticket appears to be fraudulent. The word fraudulent hit the cabin like a thunderclap. Several passengers gasped. Jennifer Martinez started a new video recording. Did you just accuse me of using a fake ticket? I'm suggesting there's been some kind of arrangement that doesn't reflect normal booking procedures. Ashley Cooper stepped forward. Rebecca, stop. Please, you're making this worse. But Rebecca was past the point of backing down. She had committed to this course of action, and her pride wouldn't let her retreat. "Ashley, call the captain. We have a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions." "What instructions?" Simone asked. "You haven't given me any instructions. You've just told me I can't sit in my assigned seat. I've instructed you to move to an appropriate seat." "Which seat would that be?" Rebecca gestured toward the back of the plane. "We have availability in premium economy." "I didn't pay for premium economy. I paid for first class." "Well, sometimes upgrades don't work out. This wasn't an upgrade. This was my original seat assignment." Jonathan Blake was thoroughly enjoying the confrontation now. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To proper passengers in proper seats," he said loudly. "Some people need to understand their place." That comment lit a fire in several passengers. The man in 4A stood up. "What the hell is wrong with you people?" Jennifer Martinez was live streaming now, narrating for her viewers. "We are watching blatant discrimination happening in real time on Skywing Flight 447. This is absolutely insane." Rebecca decided to escalate further. She picked up the cabin phone and called the galley. "Prepare to serve first-class beverages, but hold service for seat 1, a pending passenger verification." She hung up and looked directly at Simone. "First-class amenities are for verified passengers only." Ashley Cooper walked over and whispered urgently in Rebecca's ear. "Please stop this. You're going to get fired. We're going to get sued. This woman isn't doing anything wrong." Rebecca brushed her off. "I know how to handle difficult passengers. She's not being difficult. She's just sitting in her assigned seat. She's disrupting the cabin environment by existing." The two flight attendants were now arguing in front of the entire first-class cabin. Passengers were recording everything. Some were making phone calls to report what they were witnessing. Simone sat down in seat 1A. She had every right to be there, and she was done playing games. Rebecca immediately got back on the phone. "Captain Morrison, we have a passenger refusing to cooperate with crew instructions. I may need ground security assistance." Through the phone, loud enough for people to hear, came the captain's voice. "What exactly is the passenger doing? Refusing to move to an appropriate seat. Is the passenger being violent or disruptive?" Rebecca looked around the cabin. Simone was sitting quietly reading something on her phone. She wasn't talking loudly. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't doing anything except existing while black. "She's being non-cooperative. I'll be out in a minute." Rebecca hung up with a satisfied smile. The captain will resolve this situation. What she didn't know was that Captain Morrison was a 25-year veteran who had seen his share of discrimination cases, and what she definitely didn't know was that the woman she was harassing owned the airline. In exactly 4 minutes, Rebecca Walsh would discover both of those facts, and her life would never be the same. Captain James Morrison emerged from the cockpit wearing his crisp uniform and 4 gold stripes. He was a tall black man with graying temples and the calm demeanor of someone who had handled every possible crisis at 30,000 feet. He surveyed the first-class cabin. Passengers were staring. Phones were recording. His lead flight attendant looked flustered and angry. And in seat 1A sat a woman who appeared to be doing absolutely nothing wrong. "What's the situation?" "Ms. Walsh, Captain. We have a passenger in an inappropriate seat assignment. I've asked her multiple times to relocate, but she's refusing to cooperate." Captain Morrison looked at Simone, who nodded politely at him. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Simone handed over her phone. The captain scanned the digital pass with Rebecca's device. "Seat 1A. First class. Status shows VIP priority." He looked up. "Everything appears to be in order." Rebecca's face went red. "But, Captain, there are standards." "Ms. Walsh, what specific company policy is this passenger violating?" The cabin fell silent. Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't cite a policy because no policy existed. She doesn't look like what Ms. Walsh. The question hung in the air like a sword. Rebecca realized she was about to say something that would end her career, but she was too deep in to stop. Like our typical first-class demographic. Captain Morrison's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Our first-class demographic. You know what I mean, Captain. No, Ms. Walsh, I don't. Please explain. Ashley Cooper stepped forward. Captain, with respect, I think we should just proceed with boarding and... Rebecca cut her off. Ashley, you're out of line. Captain, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know how to maintain appropriate cabin standards. Jonathan Blake chose that moment to add fuel to the fire. Captain, I've been flying this route for years. I've never seen this type of passenger in first class before. It's quite unusual. Jennifer Martinez had heard enough. She stood up again. This type of passenger? What type is that exactly? A paying customer? A customer who belongs in this section, Jonathan replied. Based on what? Her skin color. Based on appropriate presentation and social standards. The words were out. Jonathan had said what Rebecca couldn't bring herself to say directly. The cabin erupted. The man in 4A. Are you serious right now? A woman in 5B. This is disgusting. A teenager in 3A. Someone better be recording this. Captain Morrison raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Mr. Blake, that comment was inappropriate and discriminatory. I'm going to ask you to remain quiet while I resolve this situation. He turned to Rebecca. Ms. Walsh, this passenger has valid documentation for seat 1A. There is no company policy that allows you to move passengers based on your personal opinion of their appearance or social status. The passenger will remain in her assigned seat. Rebecca's voice became shrill. But Captain, I'm responsible for maintaining the first-class experience. You're responsible for serving all passengers with equal respect and professionalism. That's your job. I know my job. Clearly, you don't. The cabin had become a pressure cooker. Passengers were openly arguing. Ashley Cooper was near tears. Rebecca was backed into a corner but still fighting. And then Jonathan Blake made the worst decision of his life. He pulled out his phone and called 911. Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance on Skywing Flight 447 at JFK Airport. There's a suspicious passenger who may have fraudulent documentation. That was when Simone Davis decided she had seen enough. She stood up slowly, reached into her bag, and pulled out a leather portfolio embossed with the Skywing Airlines logo. Captain Morrison, she said quietly. I think it's time everyone understood exactly who they're talking to. Jennifer Martinez had been live streaming for 20 minutes. Her viewer count had exploded from her usual 200 followers to over 15,000 people watching in real time. The comments were flying by faster than she could read. Call the news. This is 2024, not 1954. Sue them for everything. What airline is this? I'm never flying Skywing again. She wasn't the only one filming. The tech executive in 4A had his phone out. The teenager in 3A was recording and posting to multiple platforms simultaneously. Even some passengers in economy class were filming through the gaps between seats. Skywing scandal was now trending on Twitter. Flight discrimination was picking up momentum. Justice at 3,000 feet was starting to gain traction. But the video that was really going viral was the original TikTok from the check-in counter. Miguel Santos refusing to believe Simone's first-class ticket was real even after scanning it. That video now had 800,000 views and was being shared across every social media platform. News outlets were starting to pick up the story. A producer from CNN was already en route to JFK Airport. The Associated Press had sent an alert to Newsroom's discrimination incident unfolding live on social media aboard Skywing Airlines flight. Jennifer's live stream chat was exploding with support. That woman has more dignity than I would have. How is she staying so calm? The flight attendant needs to be fired. That passenger calling 911 needs to be arrested for false reporting. But it wasn't just Jennifer's stream. Multiple passengers were broadcasting live to different platforms. The incident was being documented from every angle in real time to thousands of viewers. Ashley Cooper was watching the phones pointed in her direction with growing horror. She had been a flight attendant for 2 years and had never seen anything like this. She knew Rebecca's behavior was wrong, but she also knew speaking up could cost her job. Until now, she had chosen to stay silent. "Rebecca," she whispered urgently, "do you see how many people are filming this? We need to stop. You need to let her sit down." Rebecca was beyond listening. The pressure of being recorded, the captain's disapproval, and her own stubborn pride had created a perfect storm of bad decisions. "I don't care who's filming. I have a job to do." The number of people watching across all platforms had reached 50,000 and was climbing rapidly. Skywing CEO was starting to trend, though most viewers didn't understand why yet. That was about to change. While Captain Morrison tried to de-escalate the cabin situation, word was spreading through other parts of the airport. Miguel Santos was still at his check-in counter when his supervisor approached. "Miguel, we're getting calls about an incident involving a passenger you processed earlier. Something about discrimination." Miguel's stomach dropped. He had been hoping the morning's confrontation would blow over. He hadn't realized it was being filmed and posted online. It was just a misunderstanding. The passenger had an unusual ticket situation. Unusual how she didn't look like she belonged in first class. His supervisor stared at him. She didn't look like she belonged. You know what I mean. Her clothing, her presentation. "Miguel, please tell me you didn't deny service based on a passenger's appearance." But that's exactly what he had done. And now, with the video evidence spreading across the internet, there was no way to deny it. Meanwhile, aboard Flight 447, other passengers were beginning to share their own experiences with Skywing's discriminatory practices. The woman in Seat 5B doctor. Patricia Johnson was a pediatric surgeon. She was also African American. She leaned forward and spoke to the cabin. "This isn't the first time I've experienced this on Skywing. Last year, they questioned my first-class ticket 3 times before letting me board." The man in 4A, David Park, a Korean-American tech entrepreneur, nodded. "They've stopped me multiple times for random additional screening. It's never random when it happens to the same people repeatedly." Ashley Cooper was listening to these testimonies with growing dismay. She had seen Rebecca treat certain passengers differently, but she had told herself it wasn't her business. She had been wrong. "Rebecca," she said, her voice shaking, "people are saying this has happened before. On our flights, with our crew." Rebecca's face was bright red now. "Those are isolated incidents. I follow company procedures." "What procedures?" "What policy says you can move passengers based on how they look?" "I use my professional judgment to maintain cabin standards." "Whose standards?" "Yours." Ashley pulled out her own phone and began recording. If this was going to be documented, she wanted her opposition to Rebecca's behavior on record, too. "I'm Ashley Cooper, junior flight attendant on this flight. I want to state clearly that this passenger has done nothing wrong. She has a valid ticket, she's been polite and calm, and she deserves to be treated with the same respect as every other passenger." Rebecca spun around. Ashley turned that phone off immediately. "No, I'm tired of watching this happen. I'm tired of staying quiet." The cabin was now divided into clear camps. Most passengers supported Simone. A few, led by Jonathan Blake, seemed to agree with Rebecca's position. The crew was split between Rebecca's authority and Ashley's moral stance. But what none of them knew was that this wasn't just about one flight attendant's prejudice. This was about a pattern of discrimination that had been building for years, enabled by management's willingness to look the other way when complaints were filed. Simone knew. She had the employee files. She had the complaint records. She had 8 years of documentation showing how Rebecca's behavior had been reported ignored and allowed to continue. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was an institutional problem, and she was about to solve it permanently. Jonathan Blake was still on the phone with 911, loudly describing Simone as a suspicious person with questionable documentation who was causing a disturbance on the aircraft. His voice carried throughout the cabin as he embellished details with each sentence. She's refusing to follow crew instructions. Yes, she appears agitated. No, I don't think she belongs in this section of the plane. Captain Morrison had heard enough. Mr. Blake, end that call immediately. You are filing a false police report. False? I'm reporting what I see. You're reporting a paying passenger sitting in her assigned seat as a security threat. That's a false report. Jonathan continued talking to the dispatcher. The captain appears to be siding with the disruptive passenger. Captain Morrison made a decision that would later be cited in corporate training manuals. He walked over and took the phone from Jonathan's hand. This is Captain Morrison of Skywing Flight 447. The passenger emergency call you just received is false. There is no security threat aboard this aircraft. The caller will be removed from the flight for filing a fraudulent report. He hung up and looked directly at Jonathan. Sir, you're off this plane. Gather your belongings. The cabin erupted in cheers and applause. Passengers were openly celebrating the captain's decisive action. But Rebecca wasn't done. The removal of her ally had only made her more desperate. Captain, you can't remove a first-class passenger for filing a false police report. Yes, I absolutely can, and I'm removing him for harassment of other passengers. Rebecca's voice became shrill. He was supporting my assessment of the situation. Your assessment was wrong. Your treatment of this passenger has been discriminatory and unprofessional. And your behavior is now being documented by multiple passengers and broadcast live online. Captain Morrison gestured toward the phones still recording throughout the cabin. Ms. Walsh, you have created a public relations disaster for this airline. I strongly suggest you step back and allow this passenger to enjoy her flight in peace. But Rebecca had passed the point of rational decision-making. 8 years of getting away with discriminatory behavior had convinced her that she was untouchable. She had the support of management. She had seniority. She had company policy on her side. Except she didn't. She never had. Captain, I'm filing a formal complaint about your interference with my crew authority. This passenger is disruptive, and I'm following established procedures to maintain cabin safety. What disruption? She's sitting quietly in her assigned seat. Her presence is creating tension among other passengers. No, your treatment of her is creating tension. Ashley Cooper stepped forward again. Captain, I need to say something officially. This passenger has done absolutely nothing disruptive. She's been polite, calm, and patient despite being harassed for the last 30 minutes. Any tension in this cabin is coming from discriminatory treatment, not from her behavior. Rebecca whirled on her junior colleague. Ashley, you are insubordinate. I'm writing you up for what? For telling the truth. For undermining crew authority. I'm not undermining authority. I'm upholding basic human decency. The 2 flight attendants were now in open conflict in front of 50 passengers and thousands of online viewers. Rebecca's authority was crumbling in real time, being broadcast across social media. Jennifer Martinez provided live commentary for her viewers. The senior flight attendant is now arguing with her own junior colleague because the younger woman is standing up for what's right. This is absolutely insane. The viewer count on various live streams had reached 75,000 people. Skywing scandal was trending nationally. Local news stations in New York were dispatching crews to JFK Airport, and then Simone Davis stood up and opened her leather portfolio. Inside Simone's portfolio were documents that would change everything: corporate acquisition papers, board of directors authorizations, and employee records dating back 8 years. But she didn't reveal them yet. She had one more test for her airline. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly before the situation escalates further, "I'd like to make a phone call." "Of course, ma'am." "Would you like privacy?" "No. I think everyone should hear this." She dialed a number and put the call on speaker. The phone rang twice before being answered. "Skywing Airlines Corporate Customer Service. This is Maria speaking. How can I help you?" "Maria, this is a passenger on flight 447. I'm currently being denied service and harassed by crew members because of my race. I'd like to file a formal discrimination complaint." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Can you give me details about what's happening? I'm sitting in my assigned first-class seat, which I paid for. The lead flight attendant has spent 30 minutes telling me I don't belong here, questioning my ticket, and trying to move me to economy class. She's also denied me any beverage service because I haven't been verified as a proper first-class passenger." Another pause. "Ma'am, that's absolutely unacceptable. Can you give me the flight number and crew names, flight 447 JFK to London? The lead flight attendant is Rebecca Walsh." Rebecca's face went white when she heard her name spoken to corporate customer service. "Ma'am, I'm escalating this immediately to our discrimination response team. Rebecca Walsh should not be treating any passenger that way. Are there witnesses? About 50 passengers, and several are live streaming this to thousands of people online." "Oh my God. Ma'am, I'm getting my supervisor immediately." A new voice came on the line. "This is David Roberts, customer service manager. Ma'am, I cannot apologize enough for what you're experiencing. Rebecca Walsh will be subject to immediate disciplinary action. Can you put her on the phone?" Simone held the phone toward Rebecca. "The customer service manager would like to speak with you." Rebecca reluctantly took the phone. Her hand was shaking. "Hello, Ms. Walsh. This is David Roberts. You are being recorded. Can you explain why you've denied service to a first-class passenger? I was following company procedures for passenger verification." "What procedures?" "We don't have any verification procedures for passengers with valid tickets for maintaining appropriate cabin standards." "Ms. Walsh, are you saying you denied service based on your personal opinion of what passengers should look like?" The question hung in the air. Rebecca knew that anything she said would be recorded and could be used against her. But she also knew that admitting wrongdoing would end her career. "I used my professional judgment to discriminate against a passenger based on her appearance, to maintain the first-class experience our customers expect. Ms. Walsh, you are suspended pending immediate investigation. Put Captain Morrison on the phone." Rebecca's career had just ended, live on speakerphone in front of 50 passengers and thousands of online viewers. But the worst was yet to come, because Simone Davis was about to reveal exactly who she was. Simone took the phone back from Rebecca and spoke to the customer service manager. "Mr. Roberts, thank you for your quick response. However, there's something you need to know about who you're talking to." She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a document with corporate letterhead. "My name is Simone Davis. 72 hours ago, I finalized the acquisition of Skywing Airlines through Atlas Aviation Holdings. I currently own 87% of this company." The silence that followed was deafening. Every passenger in first class stopped moving. Rebecca's face went from red to white to gray. Ashley Cooper's mouth fell open. Even Captain Morrison looked stunned. On the phone, David Roberts' voice was barely a whisper. "Ma'am, are you saying you're—" "I'm saying I'm the owner of Skywing Airlines, and for the past hour I've been discriminated against, harassed, and denied service by my own employees." The cabin erupted. Passengers were gasping. Some were cheering, others were laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Jennifer Martinez was providing rapid-fire commentary to her live stream viewers. "Oh my God, the passenger is the owner of the airline. The flight attendant just discriminated against her own boss. This is incredible. Rebecca looked like she was about to faint. She grabbed the back of a seat for support. That's not possible. Simone opened her portfolio fully and displayed the acquisition documents, signed corporate authorizations and board of directors certifications for everyone to see. Atlas Aviation Holdings acquired Skywing Airlines on Monday for $4.8 billion. The press release goes out tomorrow morning. I'm here today conducting an undercover assessment of customer service standards. She paused and looked directly at Rebecca. You failed. Ashley Cooper was the first to find her voice. Oh my God, Rebecca. Oh my God, what did you do? Jonathan Blake, who was supposed to have been removed from the plane but was still gathering his belongings, turned pale as he realized he had just called the police on the owner of the airline. Captain Morrison stepped forward. Ms. Davis, I apologize on behalf of the entire crew. This behavior is unacceptable and does not represent Skywing's values. Actually, Captain, I'm afraid it does represent Skywing's values. That's why I'm here. We've been receiving discrimination complaints for months. I wanted to see the problem firsthand. She gestured toward Rebecca, who was now visibly shaking. What I've witnessed today is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern of behavior that's been enabled by inadequate training, insufficient oversight, and a corporate culture that prioritizes appearance over equality. The customer service manager's voice came through the phone speaker, Ms. Davis. I am mortified. We had no idea. Mr. Roberts, you're about to find out exactly how deep this problem runs. I want every discrimination complaint filed against this crew pulled and reviewed. I want training records, I want supervision reports, and I want them within the hour. Rebecca finally found her voice, though it was shaky and desperate. Ms. Davis, I didn't know. If I had known who you were? Simone's response was cold and precise. If you had known who I was, you would have treated me differently. I would have... You would have been polite, professional, respectful. Rebecca nodded weakly. So you're capable of treating passengers well. You just choose not to do it for people who don't look like they meet your personal standards. The observation hit like a sledgehammer. Rebecca had just admitted that her discrimination was intentional and selective. Simone stood in the center of the first-class cabin, her voice carrying clearly to every passenger and every phone recording. Rebecca Walsh, you are fired. Effective immediately. You will be escorted off this aircraft and banned from all Skywing properties. The cabin exploded in cheers and applause. Passengers were standing up, clapping, some were crying with relief that justice was finally being served. Rebecca's legs nearly gave out. Ms. Davis, please, I have 8 years with this company. I have a mortgage, I have bills. You should have thought about that before you decided to discriminate against passengers. You're terminated for cause. There will be no severance package. Simone turned to the phone still on speaker. Mr. Roberts, I need security to escort Rebecca Walsh from the aircraft immediately. She's no longer a Skywing employee. Yes, ma'am. Security is already en route. I also need Miguel Santos from ground services located and terminated immediately. His behavior at check-in was equally unacceptable. Already in progress, ma'am. He's being removed from the terminal as we speak. Ashley Cooper stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Ms. Davis, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have stopped this. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage until now. Simone looked at the young woman who had finally found her voice when it mattered most. Ashley Cooper, you're promoted. Effective immediately. You're the new lead flight attendant for this aircraft. Your first assignment is to ensure every passenger receives exemplary service for the remainder of this flight. Ashley broke down, crying. Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise I'll never let this happen again. The passengers erupted in another round of applause. Ashley had become an instant hero for standing up to her supervisor when it mattered most. Simone turned her attention to Jonathan Blake, who was trying to quietly slip off the aircraft with his luggage. "Mr. Blake, where are you going?" He turned around, his face red with embarrassment and fear. "I was just," the captain said. "The captain said you were removed for filing a false police report. But I have something additional to add. You are permanently banned from Skywing Airlines. You will never fly with us again. You can't do that. I own the airline. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is to ensure that passengers who make racist comments and file false police reports against other passengers are not welcome on my aircraft." Security officers appeared at the entrance to the aircraft. They had arrived faster than usual because word had spread through the airport about what was happening on Flight 447. "Ma'am, we're here to escort the terminated employees. Rebecca Walsh and Jonathan Blake need to be removed immediately. Ms. Walsh is no longer employed by Skywing. Mr. Blake is banned for filing false reports and harassment." As Rebecca and Jonathan were escorted off the plane, passengers continued cheering and recording. The moment was being broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of viewers across multiple platforms. Jennifer Martinez provided commentary. Justice is being served in real time. The discriminatory flight attendant and the racist passenger are both being removed from the aircraft. This is what accountability looks like. As the aircraft settled down after the removals, passengers began approaching Simone to share their own experiences and offer support. Dr. Patricia Johnson from Seat 5B stood up. "Ms. Davis, thank you for doing this. I've experienced discrimination on flights for years and never knew how to fight back effectively." David Park from 4A nodded. "What you've done here is going to change things for all of us. Thank you for having the courage to stand up." The teenager in 3A Madison Williams was still filming Ms. Davis. "This video is going to be everywhere. You're going to inspire so many people to stand up for themselves." But it was Jennifer Martinez who captured the moment perfectly. "Ms. Davis, I'm a documentary filmmaker. What happened here today needs to be told as a complete story. Would you be willing to let me follow up on this? I think this could help change airline industry practices nationwide." Simone smiled for the first time since boarding the aircraft. "Jennifer, I think that's an excellent idea. But first, let's make sure everyone on this flight has the experience they deserve." Ashley Cooper, now wearing Rebecca's lead attendant designation, approached with a service cart. "Ms. Davis, we'd like to serve champagne to the entire first-class cabin. Complimentary, of course. We want to turn this difficult experience into a celebration of what's right." Simone nodded. "That sounds perfect." And Ashley included the passengers in economy class, too. Everyone on this aircraft deserves to celebrate. The transformation was immediate. Ashley and the other crew members began providing exceptional service to every passenger. They were smiling genuinely, not performing fake courtesy. They were treating everyone with equal respect and attention. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've resolved the service issues in the cabin and are now preparing for departure. I want to personally apologize to any passengers who witnessed discrimination today. That behavior does not represent Skywing Airlines' values, and it will not be tolerated going forward." The passengers burst into applause again. Several were crying. Everyone was recording the captain's words. Simone took her seat in 1A. The seat she had paid for, the seat she had been denied, the seat that was rightfully hers. But now it represented something much larger than just a place to sit. It represented change. While the aircraft was finally preparing for takeoff, Simone's phone was exploding with calls and messages. Her assistant had been monitoring the social media explosion and keeping the board of directors updated in real time. The TikTok video from the check-in counter now had 2.1 million views. Jennifer's live stream had peaked at 150,000 concurrent viewers. Skywing CEO was trending globally. News outlets around the world were picking up the story. Simone answered a call from her head of communications. Simone, every major news outlet is calling. CNN, NBC, ABC, BBC, Reuters, everyone wants an exclusive interview. How do you want to handle this? Set up a press conference for tomorrow morning. I want to address this publicly and outline the changes we're making company-wide. The stock price is doing something weird. It dropped 4% initially when the discrimination video went viral, but now it's up 12%. Investors are loving the accountability story. That's because investors understand that discrimination is bad for business. We're not just doing the right thing morally, we're doing the right thing financially. Her assistant chimed in on another call. Simone, we're getting calls from other airlines. They want to know what training programs we're implementing. American Airlines wants to partner on anti-discrimination initiatives. Good. This shouldn't just change Skywing. This should change the entire industry. The aircraft was now taxiing toward the runway. Flight 447 was finally going to depart more than an hour late, but with a completely different energy than when boarding began. Ashley Cooper approached Simone's seat with a champagne glass and a sincere smile. Ms. Davis, thank you for giving me a chance to do the right thing. I promise you won't regret promoting me. Ashley, you earned that promotion the moment you stood up to Rebecca. That took courage. Courage is what we need throughout this company. What's going to happen next? I mean to all of us. Simone looked around the cabin. Passengers were smiling, talking, sharing contact information. The crew was working together harmoniously. The atmosphere had gone from hostile to hopeful. What's going to happen next is that we're going to rebuild this airline into something we can all be proud of. Every employee, every passenger, every stakeholder. We're going to create a company culture based on respect, equality, and excellence. The aircraft lifted off the runway, climbing into the clouds above New York City. But the real flight, the journey toward justice and institutional change, was just beginning. The next morning, Simone convened an emergency board meeting at Skywing's headquarters in Atlanta. The 20-member board of directors had all seen the viral videos. They knew the company was at a crossroads. Ladies and gentlemen, Simone began yesterday's incident represents a fundamental failure of our corporate culture. This wasn't about one bad employee. This was about an organization that allowed discrimination to flourish. She projected statistics onto the conference room screen. In the past 3 years, we've received 247 discrimination complaints. How many resulted in employee termination? Board member James Patterson shifted uncomfortably. I believe the number is minimal. 0. The number is 0. We've buried complaints, transferred problem employees, and avoided accountability at every level. Sarah Goldman, the head of human resources, spoke up. Simone, we followed standard HR procedures for investigating complaints, standard procedures that resulted in no consequences for discriminatory behavior. Those procedures were inadequate. Simone clicked to the next slide. Effective immediately, we're implementing comprehensive changes. The reform package she outlined was sweeping new hiring standards. All customer-facing positions would require bias prevention training before employment. Background checks would include review of social media for discriminatory content. Hiring panels would include diversity representatives. Training revolution. Every Skywing employee would complete quarterly bias prevention workshops. Training would be interactive, scenario-based, and personally accountable. Completion would be tied to employment status and advancement opportunities. Accountability measures. Any discrimination complaint would trigger immediate investigation by external third parties. Employee reviews would include customer satisfaction scores across all demographic groups. Promotion requirements would include demonstrated commitment to equality. Reporting options. Anonymous complaint networks would be established with direct reporting to executive leadership. Complaint patterns would trigger automatic reviews of entire departments or locations. These changes will cost approximately $15 million annually, Simone concluded. But discrimination costs us far more than that in lost customers' legal settlements and reputation damage. Board member William Chen raised his hand. Simone, while I support these goals, isn't this response a bit extreme? We're talking about isolated incidents. William, there's nothing isolated about 247 complaints. There's nothing isolated about viral videos showing our employees discriminating against passengers. This is who we've been. Now we're going to become something better. The board voted unanimously to approve the reform package. But Simone wasn't finished. I'm also announcing the creation of the Skywing Equality Institute. We're going to partner with civil rights organizations, academic institutions, and community groups to research and combat discrimination in the aviation industry. The institute would have an annual budget of $50 million and would work with other airlines to develop industry-wide standards for equality and inclusion. Within 72 hours of the Flight 447 incident, every major airline was reviewing their own discrimination policies. The viral nature of the videos had created a PR crisis that extended far beyond Skywing. Delta Airlines announced enhanced training programs for all employees. American Airlines committed to hiring a chief diversity officer. United Airlines began conducting unannounced audits of customer service interactions. The Federal Aviation Administration launched a comprehensive review of discrimination policies across the industry. Transportation Secretary Maria Rodriguez announced new regulations requiring airlines to report discrimination complaints publicly. The flying public deserves to know how they'll be treated regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, or appearance. Secretary Rodriguez stated at a press conference. The Skywing incident shows us that voluntary compliance isn't enough. We need enforceable standards. The Association of Flight Attendants issued new guidelines for member training. The International Air Transport Association created a task force on passenger equality. The incident had sparked industry-wide change. Legal experts predicted that the Skywing case would become a landmark precedent for corporate accountability in discrimination cases. Professor Angela Davis of Columbia Law School explained, "When the victim of discrimination is also the owner of the company, it creates unique legal dynamics. This case will be studied for decades as an example of how individual courage can drive institutional change." The stock market response was overwhelmingly positive. Skywing's stock price continued to rise as investors recognized that the company's commitment to equality was also a commitment to sustainable profitability. Investment analyst Robert Martinez noted, "Discrimination is expensive. Legal costs, settlement payments, lost customers, regulatory scrutiny. It all adds up. Skywing's aggressive approach to eliminating bias is actually a brilliant business strategy." Rebecca Walsh's career in aviation was over. Within 48 hours of her termination, her story had been picked up by every major news outlet. Her name and face were associated with workplace discrimination across the internet. She applied for positions at 3 other airlines. All 3 rejected her application immediately upon background checks revealing her role in the Skywing incident. She tried applying for flight attendant positions at smaller regional carriers. Word had spread throughout the industry that she was unemployable. Eventually, she found work at a retail store in her hometown of Phoenix. The pay was less than half of her airline salary. Her airline pension was forfeited due to termination for cause. 6 months after the incident, a local journalist found her working the night shift at a discount clothing store. "Do you regret what happened on Flight 447?" the journalist asked. Rebecca's response was telling, "I regret getting caught." Even after losing everything, she still didn't understand that her behavior was wrong. She had learned nothing from the experience. Miguel Santos fared no better. His termination from Skywing made him ineligible for employment at any major airline. He tried working for airport services companies, but his reputation followed him. He eventually moved back to his hometown in Texas and found work at a car rental counter. Like Rebecca, he blamed everyone except himself for his circumstances. Jonathan Blake's consequences were severe but different. As a partner in an investment firm, he faced immediate professional scrutiny when the videos went viral. His firm's clients began asking questions about his character and judgment. Several major accounts terminated their relationships. His partners called an emergency meeting. "Jonathan, you've created a liability for this firm," senior partner, Margaret Stevens, explained. "Our reputation is built on trust and ethical behavior. What you did on that aircraft shows a fundamental lack of judgment." The firm offered him a buyout of his partnership at significantly reduced terms. He had no choice but to accept. His social connections also suffered. Country club memberships were quietly terminated. Charity boards asked for his resignation. Professional associations distanced themselves from him. Jonathan discovered that racism has a cost in modern society, especially when it's captured on video and viewed by millions of people. Ashley Cooper's life changed dramatically in the opposite direction. Her promotion to lead flight attendant came with a significant salary increase, but more importantly, it gave her a platform to create change. She was chosen to head Skywing's new equality training program. Her first-hand experience with discrimination, both witnessing it and confronting it, made her uniquely qualified to teach other employees. "I spent 2 years watching Rebecca treat certain passengers differently," she told training classes. "I told myself it wasn't my responsibility to intervene. I was wrong. Every employee has a responsibility to stand up for what's right." Her training sessions were powerful and personal. She didn't just teach policies and procedures. She taught moral courage and personal accountability. Employee satisfaction scores improved dramatically across Skywing. Staff felt empowered to do the right thing without fear of retaliation. Customer satisfaction followed the same trend. Passengers noticed the improved atmosphere immediately. Online reviews began mentioning the exceptional service and genuine respect they experienced. Jennifer Martinez used her documentary footage to create a film called 30,000 Feet, A Story of Justice in the Sky. The film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was acquired by Netflix for global distribution. The documentary became required viewing at business schools across the country. It was used in corporate training programs throughout the aviation industry. Jennifer donated all profits from the film to civil rights organizations working to combat discrimination in transportation. David Kim, the airport security supervisor who had intervened during Simone's initial screening, was promoted to head of passenger services security for the entire JFK Airport terminal. His experience recognizing and stopping discriminatory behavior made him invaluable in training other security personnel. Captain Morrison became Skywing's chief pilot for diversity and inclusion, working to ensure that discriminatory behavior was identified and stopped at every level of airline operations. The passengers who witnessed and documented the incident remained connected through social media. They formed an informal network supporting others who experienced discrimination while traveling. Dr. Patricia Johnson established a scholarship fund for underrepresented minorities pursuing careers in aviation. David Park created a mobile app allowing passengers to report discrimination incidents in real time to airline executives and civil rights organizations. The teenagers who had filmed everything became activists for equality in their schools and communities. Madison Williams was invited to speak at high schools about the importance of documenting and confronting injustice. What had started as a terrible experience for one passenger had created a network of advocates for equality that extended far beyond the airline industry. On a crisp January morning, Simone Davis walked through the same terminal where her journey had begun. Terminal 5 at JFK looked identical, but everything had changed. The check-in counter where Miguel Santos had refused to believe her first-class ticket was now staffed by Maria Rodriguez, a young Latina woman who had been promoted from the economy service desk. She greeted every passenger with genuine warmth and professionalism. "Good morning, Ms. Davis, Flight 447 to London, Seat 1A. We're honored to have you flying with us today." The security checkpoint that had subjected her to additional screening now operated with new protocols. Every passenger was treated equally. David Kim's training programs had eliminated discriminatory practices. The first-class lounge had new staff trained in Skywing's updated service standards. But more importantly, it had a new mission statement displayed prominently. Excellence in service means respect for all passengers, regardless of appearance, background, or status. At Gate B12, passengers were boarding Flight 447. The same flight number, the same route, but operated with completely different values. Ashley Cooper, now wearing the gold stripes of a senior flight attendant, greeted passengers at the aircraft door. Her smile was genuine. Her welcome was universal, and her commitment to equality was evident in every interaction. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Davis. It's wonderful to see you again." Simone took her seat in 1A, the same seat she had fought for 6 months earlier. But now the battle was over. The seat represented victory, justice, and transformation. The passenger in 2A was a young black college student traveling on a scholarship that had been funded by Skywing's new equality initiatives. She looked nervous about her first international flight. "First time flying to London?" Simone asked. "Yes, ma'am. I'm studying abroad at Oxford. I never thought I'd be able to afford first class." "Education should open doors," Simone replied. "That's what we're trying to do, make sure everyone has access to the same opportunities." Ashley approached with the beverage service, treating every passenger with identical respect and attention. The champagne was offered to everyone. The service was flawless. The atmosphere was welcoming. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Morrison welcoming you aboard Skywing Flight 447. We're honored to serve passengers from all walks of life, and we're committed to ensuring everyone feels respected and valued during their journey with us." As the aircraft lifted off, Simone looked out the window at the city below. 6 months ago, she had boarded this same flight, angry and determined to expose discrimination. Today, she was boarding as someone who had transformed an entire industry. The Skywing incident became more than a viral video or a news story. It became a case study in how individual courage could drive organizational change. Business schools around the world added the Flight 447 case to their curricula. Students analyzed how discrimination had been allowed to flourish, how leadership had failed to address problems, and how comprehensive reform could transform corporate culture. Harvard Business School professor, Dr. Michael Thompson wrote, "The Skywing case demonstrates that diversity and inclusion aren't just moral imperatives. They're business necessities. Companies that discriminate are companies that fail." The documentary 30,000 Feet won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. Jennifer Martinez's acceptance speech was watched by 50 million people worldwide. "This film isn't just about one incident on one airplane," she said. "It's about the power we all have to stand up for what's right. It's about the change that's possible when someone with courage decides they've seen enough." The Simone Davis Scholarship Fund, established with proceeds from the Skywing settlement, provided full college scholarships to 500 students pursuing careers in aviation, business, and civil rights. Recipients of the scholarship were required to complete community service projects focused on combating discrimination. They became ambassadors for equality in their schools and communities. The Skywing Equality Institute published research that became the foundation for federal anti-discrimination regulations. Their work influenced policy not just in aviation, but in transportation, hospitality, and retail industries. Other companies began implementing Skywing standards, comprehensive equality training, transparent complaint processes, and accountability measures for discriminatory behavior. The phrase, "Remember Flight 447," became a rallying cry for civil rights activists. It represented the idea that discrimination could be confronted and defeated through courage, documentation, and determination. 1 year after the incident, Simone received a letter that brought tears to her eyes. It was from a young girl named Rosa, named after Simone's grandmother, whose family had been planning to avoid air travel because of discrimination they had experienced. "Dear Ms. Davis, The letter read, "My family saw your story on TV. My mom said you made it safe for people like us to fly again. We're going to visit my grandparents in Puerto Rico next month. It will be my first time on an airplane. Thank you for making sure I'll be treated with respect." That letter captured everything Simone had been fighting for. It wasn't about revenge against Rebecca or Miguel or Jonathan. It was about creating a world where no 8-year-old would have to watch their grandmother be humiliated because of the color of her skin. At Skywing's annual employee meeting, Simone addressed 50,000 workers via video conference. Her message was simple but powerful. Respect doesn't require a uniform. It doesn't require a title. It doesn't require wealth, or status, or power. Respect requires character. It requires seeing every person as worthy of dignity. It requires choosing to do what's right even when no one is watching. She paused and looked directly into the camera. 6 months ago, some of our employees forgot that lesson. They thought respect was something you earned by looking a certain way or wearing certain clothes. They were wrong. Respect is something you give because it's who you are. Today, Skywing Airlines serves passengers from every background, every community, every walk of life. We don't ask what you look like. We don't judge what you wear. We ask only that you treat others the way you want to be treated. To our employees, your job isn't just to move people from one place to another. Your job is to prove that in the sky, we're all equal. 30,000 feet above the earth, prejudice has no place. To our passengers, when you fly with us, you're not just buying a ticket. You're joining a community that believes in justice, equality, and the fundamental dignity of every human being. And to anyone watching this who has ever been told they don't belong somewhere, you belong everywhere. You belong in first class if you bought a first-class ticket. You belong in any space you've earned the right to occupy. And if someone tells you otherwise, remember that courage changes everything. The applause from Skywing employees lasted for 3 full minutes. But more importantly, their actions proved that they understood the message. Skywing became the most trusted airline in America, not because they had the newest planes or the lowest prices, but because they had earned a reputation for treating every passenger with equal respect and dignity. The company's motto, displayed in every airport and on every aircraft, became famous worldwide. Respect has no first class. Dignity has no economy section. At Skywing Airlines, everyone flies as equals. Simone Davis had kept her promise to her 8-year-old self. She had made sure this would never happen to anyone else. And every time a child boarded a Skywing aircraft with their grandmother, every time a passenger was treated with respect, regardless of their appearance, every time an employee chose courage over compliance, Rosa Davis's legacy lived on. The turbulence was over. The sky belonged to everyone. Justice had finally learned to fly. If this story moved, you don't just watch and forget. Take action. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that courage changes everything. Hit that like button if you believe every person deserves respect, regardless of how they look. Subscribe to this channel because stories like this matter, and we have more powerful tales of justice coming your way. Remember, you never know who you're talking to. The person in casual clothes might own the company. The quiet passenger in the corner might be the one who can change everything. Treat everyone with dignity because in the end, character is the only currency that truly matters. Until next time, stand up for what's right. Speak up for those who can't, and never forget that sometimes it only takes one person with courage to change the world.